Okay, so we're going to finish up chapter 16. President Lincoln knew that a victory at Antietam was very important. So he put out a warning to the Confederate States. He said he would free all of the slaves if the Confederate States did not rejoin the Union. So on that map we looked at yesterday, that's all the red states. He's telling them he's going to say that all the slaves are free unless they join the country again. So a lot of people in the South thought that he was bluffing, thought he wouldn't actually do it. But when January rolled around, Lincoln wrote the Emancipation Proclamation, and it announced that all of the slaves in those red states were now free. So the Emancipation Proclamation did not completely end slavery, but it was a major step towards many people getting their freedom. So what happens, many slaves that ran away helped out in the army or fought major battles. We saw that in the movie we watched, Harriet, and in the movie we just got done watching, Glory. That's what this whole movie is about. Many slaves who ran away joined the Union, even before the Emancipation Proclamation. They're going to join the side that's going to fight for their freedom. About 180,000 former slaves joined up with the Union Army. The 23 African American soldiers even won the Medal of Honor. And one of the most famous groups of African American soldiers was the 54th Massachusetts Volunteers. And that's the group of soldiers that we saw in the movie Glory. What happened at Gettysburg and Chancellorsville? General Joseph Hooker wanted to keep an army at Fredericksburg to keep General Robert E. Lee busy, and he's hoping to attack him at Chancellorsville at the same time. So he's hoping to be able to attack the South from two different angles. General Lee heard we were coming for him, so he left an army ready to defend it there. And he said, you know what, if you're going to try to sneak me, I'm going to sneak you first. And he sent in a smaller group of soldiers to attack us, to surprise us. Robert E. Lee and General Stonewall Jackson's soldiers easily defeated the Union at that battle because we were not prepared for it. We weren't expecting them. But there was an accident. Stonewall Jackson, the number 2 guy for the Confederacy, is accidentally shot by one of his own men, and he dies about a week later. This is a major blow to the South because he's their number 2 in command for the military. So, if you remember from the last lesson, the North had a plan called the Anaconda Plan, but they didn't stick to it because it was going to take too long. And the South's plan was to wait for the North to come and to fight defensively. But it appears that the South is starting to lose this war. So they start to change their plan. Instead of waiting to fight defensively, they start to go on the attack. So Robert E. Lee decides to attack the North, and he makes his way into Pennsylvania with about 65,000 soldiers, and the North is ready and waiting with about 85,000 of theirs. The two armies meet at a place called Gettysburg. The battle goes on at Gettysburg for about 3 days, and it goes back and forth. At some points it looks like the North is winning, at some points it looks like the South is winning. Robert E. Lee sends his soldiers on a desperate strike on the 3rd day, and he sent General George Pickett with 13,000 soldiers to meet the Union soldiers, and they were expecting to be able to push us back and change the tide of the battle. Unfortunately, it does not work, and the North is actually able to push the South back and win the fight at Gettysburg. So the North wins the battle at Gettysburg, but this fight goes on for 3 days, so the amount of people that die from both teams is catastrophic. The South has come to realize something too. After this battle, they realize that they cannot win this war. They know that if they keep fighting this way, eventually they'll just run out of soldiers. 4 months after the Battle of Gettysburg, Abe Lincoln, he tries to take steps towards peace. He dedicates a national cemetery to remember all of the people who've died in the war, not just the people from the North. He wants to remember everyone who died in this war. So what did women do during this war? So we saw what people like Harriet Tubman did, working on the Underground Railroad, helping to liberate many slaves, even fighting in battle. A lot of women in the North and the South had to take over all of their husbands' responsibilities when they left to go fight. Many women in the South took over all responsibilities for the farm because the husbands are gone and they no longer have slaves, so the women are doing all the work. It was also very common for women to be nurses during this battle or during this war, because there was a huge amount of death and they needed women. They needed nurses, and the women were willing to step up and do this work, do the gruesome work of nursing these soldiers back from their horrible injuries. Okay, so we're almost done. We talked yesterday about the importance of the Mississippi River and how the North wanted to control it so the South could not ship cotton anymore, because if they can't ship cotton, they can't make any money. So the Union had a couple of important victories at Shiloh, Perrysville, and Murfreesboro in Tennessee. And as the South loses these battles, they start retreating. They're definitely realizing now they cannot win this war, and the North is turning up the heat. Ulysses Grant now controls the entire Mississippi River, and the South has no way to move their product anymore. So Ulysses Grant, once he takes the river, starts moving and taking even more of the Confederates' territory. So Abe Lincoln sees that Ulysses Grant is doing a good job winning all these battles, so Abe Lincoln makes him the commander of the entire military. So Grant is leading attacks against the South, and he's losing men along the way, but he is relentless. He is not stopping because he is determined to end this war. Different from George McClellan, who had Lee on the run and let him go, Ulysses Grant says, we're going to end this. So Robert E. Lee realizes that Ulysses Grant is not going to quit, and he starts to get worried because every time they fight, the South is losing more and more of their soldiers, and their army is getting smaller and more exhausted. So the South realizes they can't win in a battle, but they still have one chance to come out on top and win this war. The way they can win is the next presidential election. They think if they can elect someone other than Lincoln, someone who might be more on their side, they could end the war and they would be able to keep slavery. So in the election, it is Abe Lincoln versus George McClellan, the guy that Abe Lincoln fired. So it looks like it's going to be a close election, but right before the election, the North has a couple more victories in these battles against the South, and that kind of gets Lincoln the momentum to win the election. So now, we want to end this war. So General Grant and William Sherman take tons of soldiers down to South to basically force the South into surrendering. General Sherman takes about 60,000 of his men to Atlanta, and the soldiers are going there not carrying a bunch of supplies because their mission here is to burn down the farms, burn down the bridges, and basically make things so miserable for people in the South, for the civilians in the South. They put pressure on the Confederate leaders to quit, to submit. So General Sherman marched northward after he burns all of these things and gets people on his side, burns down these farms, burns down the bridges. He next goes up to meet with Ulysses Grant and Philip Sheridan. These three guys basically have Robert E. Lee surrounded. They're coming at him from three different directions, and Robert E. Lee has to make a decision. He can stand and fight or he can run. And he tries to go west, but he ends up getting surrounded at the Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia. And then Robert E. Lee decides he needs to surrender to save the rest of his soldiers' lives. So, General Robert E. Lee and General Grant meet to discuss the terms of the surrender, and Robert E. Lee is worried. He knows they have lost the war, so whatever deal Ulysses Grant gives him, he has to accept it. The South has no power to negotiate in the situation because they are the losers of the fight. So General Lee knows he must take whatever deal he gets. If not, his men are probably going to die. So Ulysses Grant offers a pretty good deal to the Confederates. He tells the Confederate soldiers they can keep their horses, they can keep their mules, they can also keep their pistols, but all the other military guns, the rifles and the cannons, had to be given over to the Union. And that's pretty much it. He says, okay guys, just give me the guns and we're done fighting. These men were expecting to be, put in jail, to be executed, and all they have to do is turn over their guns, so they are pretty excited about this. Only one guy is arrested for it. Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy, does 2 years in jail, which is kind of crazy because this war killed a huge amount of the American population, and it was the only time that America was fighting itself. The losses from this war were very, very high. It claimed a greater percentage of American lives than any other war. So more Americans by percentage died in this war than anything else. And General Sherman, when he was going down south, burning the property, caused over $100 million in property damage. So the South is going to be in shambles after this war, and they're definitely going to need some kind of guidance to rebuild and put the country back together. Okay guys, that's the end of chapter 16, so I need you to go in and work on the worksheet for chapter 16, lesson 4 and 5, plus quiz review.